That's Angear and Insults from the CJC promotional slot here on Spectrum On Air, the colourful voice of radio. And I'm very pleased to say that with technology, we can welcome Ian Wills to the show this morning. Good morning, Ian.
Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
There we go. I'm very well, thank you. And there you go. There's you up on the screen as well. Yes. And it's good to see you, my friend. And I gather that we're both South London boys, which is good, isn't it?
Yeah. So as sort of like your Crystal Palace, I was sort of Roundshire Estate, born in St Helier Hospital. I don't think more South London than that, really.
Well, yes, that's right. Now, listen, tell me about the Willing. When did it start?
It was 21 years this year. I had been in hospital, and I came out of hospital, and I knew I had to sort of take a year out of my life to recover. I got septic arthritis, and that was a battle in itself. And
isn't it?
I was really unwell, and so I thought, what am I going to do? Well, I had back in my early sort of life started with poetry, and then I started writing, and then I stopped, and I looked at all this work, and I thought, well, maybe I can do something. And so we came up with the idea of putting a band together and creating spoken word, which was where I started, blending poetry with music. And we sort of put a band together. Jesse Wood, Ronnie Wood's son, was the guitarist in the band, and we got young Jerry, who's at that time she was 21, and sort of Brendan and Jason and Martin, and we made and we sort of started making it worked in the rehearsal room. And then sort of 7 songs in, I thought, how am I going to learn to be a frontman? How am I going to learn this art? So I came up with the idea of taking it up to Edinburgh for the festival.
To the Fringe?
Yeah. I went and did the Fringe. And we came up with this idea. I think we were pioneers of it. So we had the songs, and we created stories behind the songs and played to the stories that we put together. One of them was a song called Wanks, Franks and Spanks, which was about estate agents. Yeah. And you remember Jeff Stewart, who played Reg Hollis?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So we got Jeff in to play the estate agent, and sort of like that. So we took it up to Edinburgh, and we played 29 nights. So in that process, you learn your art. And it was really, anybody who's done the festival knows you have like these great nights where everybody comes in, and you have these other nights where nobody comes in. And we had this night where nobody came in. It was pouring rain. And there was 2 girls in the audience, and I think somebody at the back. And how we would start the gig was I would walk through the audience and then walk onto the stage telling this story. So we did. The band was very despondent. They didn't want to do it, and I sort of like, we got an audience. Let's just do it. So we did the gig, and we do 25 minutes. You had a 40-minute slot, 5 minutes load in, 25 minutes is your slot, and then 10 minutes to load off for the next people to come in. And how we would do it was the band would dismantle the equipment, and I would talk to the audience. So these 2 girls talked to me, and I said, they said, "Wow, we've been reading about you. We made the decision to come and see you tonight, and how could you put in such a good performance when we're the only 2 people in the audience?" And I said, "Well, haven't you worked it out yet?" And she said, "No." I said, "I've already outsold myself by 200% because I never expect anybody to come." And then sort of like we asked me a few challenging questions, which I answered. And then she said, "Well, just to let you know, we're the ones who decide the pick of the Fringe, and you are pick of the Fringe."
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
And then sort of like that was in sort of like we came back off the back of that. I had a friend of mine who knew Janice Long, and first the big single on that album was a song called 21st Century Love Song. And so he sent it to Janice. And he phoned her up and said, "Have you listened to that song?" She said, I haven't got it. Send it to me at home. So he sent it to her kitchen, and then she phoned him up and said, "Could you tell Ian that I'm playing him tonight on my show?"
Really?
And so she broke me on Radio 2.
Yeah.
And then she came down to see us do a gig at the Cobden Club in the October of that year. And she drove back up. Her show used to be on the Mailbox in Birmingham. And she came down, see us do the gig, drove back up, and one of my treasured memories is driving over Hammersmith Bridge, and it's just after midnight, and Janice said, "I've just got in from London to see Wills and the Willing, Ian Wills. I've invited him here for January to do a live session." And as she's downstairs, she says, "I absolutely cannot stop playing this song," and she keeps playing 21st Century Love Song. And you know, you're driving over that bridge at sort of just after midnight, your head is full of the joys of what you've just done. Yeah. And then to hear your song on the radio, it's still a gift even now, you know. So that's the history really of where we started. And then, you know, it went from, we did a gig in New York. The producer, I did a radio show called the Jerry Reynolds Radio Show. It's like the #1 talk radio station in New York. And when we were there sort of like 11:45, and the producer said, "Look, Ilian, there was a guest was meant to be on between 11 and 12. They're running late. You know, are you okay sharing your slot with the other guest?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." You know, it's sort of like just grateful to get even 2 minutes on the radio. And I always remember we were sitting there, you know, sort of 54 floors up in Manhattan, doors open. This old boy comes out, and I said to Jesse, I said, "I know him," and it was Les Paul.
Really?
And so we did this. So Les and I did Jerry Reynolds' talk show, and again, sort of like Les had just turned 90 at that point, and you know, he was saying like, "Jerry, you're off to the White House. You'll be inducted again, sort of like to the second time," and all these accolades. And he stopped you midstream. Now, while I was playing 21st Century Love Song, he whispered in my ear, "Did you really write those words?" And I said, "Yeah." And so he stops in midstream. Les puts his arm on my shoulder because he's sitting next to me on my left. He said, "I just want to say, while this young man is sitting next to me, having listened to that song, there's some of the best lyrics I've heard recorded in a very, very long time." And I came out of that mic, again, sort of like from the Janice playing my song on the radio to Les Paul saying that. And I thought, if I never have another moment, they're too precious. Maybe this time will never come back in my life. And so that was really the sort of start of that first album.
That's wonderful, isn't it? Because I mean, do you think that having Janice, you know, sort of backing you and that sort of thing was the lift up the ladder, as it were?
It was, you know, Janice ended up becoming a really good friend. She championed my music. She always played it. Obviously, she only played it if she felt it warranted an airplay. She wasn't playing it, which is so that gives you belief. When somebody like Janice Long is playing your music, it's like you've got the justification for what you're doing with your life at that point in life. Don't get, you know, I made that first album when I was 42 years old. You know, you come out and say, "I'm going to make an album at 42." You do say ridicule.
It's not a sort of teenage boy band, is it, at all?
and you know, when the Sunday Times described me as the Ian Dury of the 21st century, again, it was such a high accolade, and so you feel like you're justified in your art, that your belief in your art is strong enough for you to, even if you don't get commercial success, there is this moment, the spirit of what you're doing and trying to achieve carries you through. And the self-doubt I never had.
No. This is it, isn't it? Because I think this. We were talking about this before, actually, because we have one of our programs on Spectrum, the Real Room Radio Show, which is taking a bit of a break at the moment. But Joe Corbell, who presents it, features a lot of the youngsters on it. You know, I'm talking 14, 15-year-olds, you know, who've got so much talent. It is just unbelievable, you know. But of course, the trouble is, they're youngsters, they're playing it, they're enjoying themselves, but then because they haven't got the sort of the promotional aspect behind them, they drift away from it, and then that's it, isn't it? But you haven't done that, have you?
No, you know, before I did, so going back 2 years before previously, so I had, it was 2003 to 2004. I was living in Spain, and somebody said to me, "Oh, we got one of our clients wants to sell their house. He's got a recording studio. You know, music's in my passion." So I went up to see the house, and beautiful house. And Trevor had this amazing studio. So we walked around the studio and everything else. And he just recorded Benjamin Zephaniah's album, Naked. So I said to Trevor, he came to see me in the Hackney Empire in the 80s. Now, Trevor is sort of like his history, I'll tell you in a minute, but he looked at me. I said, I'm a poet. Now, anybody who's looking at this, especially in those days, you think drug dealer, gangster. I do not have the face for a poet, right? So Trevor said to me, oh, yeah, and he's a Scouser. And I said, yes. He said, do me a poem. So I do this poem that I'd written in the 80s called HIV. So I could see that he was affected. 5 days later, he phones me up. All right, La? And I said, all right, Trevor. I said, Trevor, I don't want to buy your house. I have no idea how to run a studio. It's too much for a headache. And he said to me, I don't want you to buy my house. He said, but what I'd like you to do, for the last 5 days, you really affected me. He said, can you come back to Marbella? I want to have a go at taking your words and creating something around it. So I was like, it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I put the phone down and straight fly out back to Spain. I said, right? So anyway, I turn up at Trevor's house. I walk into the studio, and I recognise 2 other people in the studio. One I know his face, but I don't know how I know him, and the other one I knew instantly. Right. So Trevor said, "Do you want to do that poem again?" So I performed HIV, and the guy that I recognised leaned over, opened up his guitar case, pulled out his guitar, which was Big Red, and it was Alvin Lee.
God, blimey.
And so Alvin, so the other person that was there in the room is John. Anybody's listening to this, Jean-Alain Roussel. If you Google Jean-Alain Roussel, outside of his work with Vangelis, he worked with Bob Marley, he worked with Sting, he did all these amazing things.
Yeah.
So this is my first commercial recording now. Now Trevor, just sort of one of my dear friends was Bill Kenwright. And Bill was a passionate friend of mine, championed my music. And the first time he introduced me to Lloyd Webber, he didn't call me Ian or Willie. Bill always called me Willin. He said, Willin, come here. He said, Andrew, this is my poet, Willin. So Trevor phoned me up, Bill phoned me up out of the blue. He said, Willin, he said, how do you know Trevor Murray? And I told him. He said, well, I'll tell you something about Trevor. We used to queue up outside the Cavern Club in 1960 to see Trevor play. As a drummer, he was, and I remember I found some footage of Trevor on Tomorrow's World in 1973, showing how he's managed to record a drum beat into a computer. And and Trevor, when Pete Best got kicked out of the Beatles, it's rumoured that anybody who does the research that Trevor was suggested as the drummer to come in for the Beatles, but he was a bigger star than they were at that point. So Ringo Starr went into the Beatles, leaving Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, and Trevor went into them, drummed for Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, and then found a band called the Peddlers, which was amazing. And so Trevor, programmed all the stuff with Bjork, did all that stuff for her, Tricky, Underworld, Goldie, all these beats. And he's in ill health now, and I'm trying to try and see him in a few days' time. But my life was really blessed. So as a caveat to this one, so Alvin said, look, Ian, I'm happy to put my name to this, but I don't want to put my name in any publicity. I've got my own thing. I'm Alvin Lee, 10 years after. So Trevor said to me, what are we going to call ourselves then? Well, at that time, I was 42, and he was 61, so I called him 103.
Yes. Yeah. Always look old, don't they? We've got a listener over in Germany, Terry, and Terry says a great London accent.
I love it. Thank you, Terry.
Terry's an Englishman in Germany, but he worked in London on the newspapers for a long time, But I don't want to sort of hark back or talk about it really too much, as you may not want to yourself. But you weren't a very good little boy growing up, were you?
No, I was a tearaway, and actually, I described myself as a one-man crime wave at one point.
Yes.
and I never did. I always like to clarify. I never went into people's houses, right? But I was quite entrepreneurial. For instance, when you remember the days when you used to put the milk money out on the doorstep on a Friday and a Saturday?
Yeah.
You're Crystal Palace. So we were living in hell in Mill Green in Mitcham. And so I would nick a car, drive up to North Cheam and bank or Carshorn Beach and steal all the money off the milk But now to do that, I needed to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to beat the milkman who's getting out at 5.
Yes, yeah.
Right? And yes, I did get into a lot of trouble. And I had this point in my life where I said I was a good person doing bad things, and I could have ended up becoming a bad person doing really bad things.
But you didn't, though. You're a good person.
And I changed, I changed the course of my life. It was fair to say there were still challenges, but by the time I got to my early 20s, I had managed to leave that life behind, leave the reputation behind, because I was a bit of a scrapper as well, and you sort of get yourself.
Yeah, as they say, the rest is history. Yeah.
Yeah, but it taught me a lot of things.
Yes, I suppose it would do. Really, it's the facts of life, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, when I was 13, they banned me from driving for a year. When I was 14, they banned me from driving for another year. Yes. When I was 15, they banned me for driving 3.5 years. So what did that technically mean? It meant from 16 to 21 and a half, I couldn't drive. I was banned. And so I learned the ability to...
I bet you did, though.
No, I didn't. I tell you now, if I had done and got found, I would have got that was going to put me in prison for 5 years.
Yes, yeah.
So it was suspended, and I had to. So I was 15 at this point, and I had to go to the police. I had to get a job. I went for my job interview at Dewhurst the Butchers with a police officer, a psychiatrist, and a social worker to explain my predicament of life.
Well, and they all got the job, and you didn't.
Well, I always remember his name was Mr. Cummings, and he was a real Yorkshireman. Yeah. And in this interview, they explained my set of circumstances, and he was missing his pinky finger, and I kept looking at his finger rather than paying attention to what he was saying. And then he looked at me straight in the eye. He says, "You're looking at my finger, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." I said, "How did you lose it?" He said, "Doing exactly what you're not doing now." I said, "What's that?" "Paying attention." And then he asked, he said, "If I'm going to give you a job, are you going to let me down? Are you going to steal from our shops? Are you going to?" I said, I gave my word, and I had to go back to court to show that I got a job. It was part of conditions of not getting there, and so I was sort of like from 15 to just before my 17th birthday, I had to go to court every 12 weeks to show that I was making a contribution to society. And then just before my 17th birthday, because those days your criminal record was over 17, it was considered I was considered spent, and everything else was left in my juvenile record. And then I worked hard, and then when I got my license back a week after. Well, in those days, do you remember your driving license used to come in like a paper form, didn't it?
That's right. Yes. Yep.
School of motoring, opened up my driving license, went all concertinaed out. I had 27 endorsements and 3 bands. I said, "Can I have driving lessons?" No chance.
Yeah, wonderful.
So you sort of do take that as your learning point and go.
Yeah. Now you've got your anniversary this year, which is absolutely fantastic. But is this the one performance that really sticks out in your history that you always think back and you think, "Oh, that's the one that I really, really liked"?
There was after we did Edinburgh, Jason's family came up and stayed for the month and helped out, and Ricky was a teacher, and he asked me if I would consider going back to his school and talking to the kids, because I've got some connections in that sense of it. So I said yes. Then I came up with the idea. I said, "Well, hang on. The band were on a retainer, so I said to them, right, you're going to come with me to these schools. You can do a musical workshop in a music lesson. The lunatic being me will take over the English lesson. I'd done my book and sort of said." And so we worked, and we did these schools. And there was 2 gigs actually. I forget which school it was, but it was absolutely everybody in that school came to see us. The hall was packed. It was like, and we just literally did 15 minutes. Yeah. So then that evening we did a gig in a place called Tapley Park in Devon, and it was meant to hold 180 people, and I think there was 500 people in there.
Oh Lord!
And to get them, and what was interesting, to get there, you had to drive. It was in the middle of nowhere, and we finished the gig, and the encore. Everybody wanted me to play again a track called Coronation Street. And it was wonderful because when you see somebody singing, we're still underground, right? So when you see people singing your songs and they see the words, And that was amazing. I loved that night.
Yeah. And you mentioned Coronation Street there, and you saw my little picture there. I've stood outside the Rovers Return, you know. So they did let me in, actually, fortunately, but not for long. But you wrote a song about Coronation Street, didn't you?
Yeah, on Curbside, track's called Coronation Street, and I took these ironies about how tough life is, and then so there's all these things, you know, about the challenges, but then the chorus was, well, it ain't like that in Coronation Street, where they lend you a tenner the first time you meet. If any of life lessons you want to learn, then prop up the bar in the Rovers Return.
Yeah, very good. Yes, yeah.
And so, like, you know, sort of like that was the pathos of it.
Yeah, you're a lovely poet, aren't you?
Well, you know, I have this analogy, Mike, because nobody can work this out, and even I can't work it out. But I always said, in my previous life somewhere, I was up in heaven. Obviously, I was in prison heaven, doing the prison food. And walking down the line, there was Richard Feynman, there was Einstein, there's Mozart, all these people yet to come. And somehow God signaled for them to come. But as he touched them, some of their electricity went up my hand, because I can't explain any of this. So when I came here, you know, there's sort of it has been a blessing. And, I'm blessed with these lyrics. I've been able to teach myself how to play guitar in a particular way where I created all my own tunings, and you know, and when you do spoken word, there's one influence on your vocal, but when you sing, you really are exposing yourself.
Yes,
are you any good? Yeah. And that is the question I continuously ask myself.
Yeah,
but you know, from being arrested for doing Spycatcher to now, there all been these wonderful turns in my life.
Yeah. Ian, tell me about Newton's Law then, because we're going to play it in a moment.
So again, there was what's inspired that song was I read in the newspaper again about a tragedy of another young life taken, not like Henry Nowak this week.
Yeah.
And I think he was like a 5 or a 6-year-old had been murdered by his parents. And then I thought about, so that's what I thought about Newton's Law. And I thought that like, no matter how hard we try to make a difference and do good, when it's up, it's up. And you can't force yourself against gravity. So no matter what redemption you try to apply to your life, when the time comes, the time comes. And Newton's Law for me defines that moment of never being able to correct destiny.
Very philosophical. And I nearly couldn't spell it then, but there you go. Ian, it's been wonderful to talk to you this morning. I gather you're coming on with Suzanne later on in the week, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Suzanne, so there you go. That's a little bit of a prelude for you. But thank you for your company this morning. It's been great talking to you. We wish you all the very, very best with your album and that. And we will go out with Newton's Law. So take care. Have yourself a good rest of the day, and we'll see you soon, all right?
Thank you, Mike, and everybody for supporting my music and myself.
Yeah, take care.
Once you're in heaven, gently close the door. Don't answer questions, say it's Newton's Law. When you get to heaven, I won't forget your name. If asked any questions, say I'm the one to blame. No matter what life gives, what it takes, it just takes. No matter how you atone, the good die young and alone. No matter what life gives, what it takes, it just takes. No matter how you atone, the good die young and alone. And Mars flows by on a rolling stone. And if my heart stops beating, I'll carry my hacksaw, call out your name, break down heaven's door. No matter what life gives, what it takes, it just takes. No matter how you atone, the good die young and alone. And no matter what life gives, what it takes. and moss grows fine on a rolling stone. No matter what life gives, what it takes, it just takes. No matter how you atone, the good die young and alone, and moss grows fine. Moss grows fine. Moss grows fine on a rolling stone.
That's Wills and the Willing and Newton's Law from their latest album. But from me and from Alan, bye bye. We'll see you tomorrow.